Hello, hello, and welcome to the From Nature to Nurture podcast. I am your host, Danielle, and today we are on our 19th episode, which is another interview. Today we are speaking with, I think she is my number one favorite herbalist, Leah Larabell. And I have a beautiful connection to Leah Larabell because I started my herbal journey in her shop. That's where I bought all my first herbalism supplies and where I learned a lot just by listening to her help customers. And you'll hear me talk about that a little bit in the interview, but I am so eternally grateful for how much Leah has impacted my personal journey, but also my business and where I am today. I am so excited to bring you this interview because Leah is a wealth of knowledge, so deeply rooted in living with the plants and working reciprocally with the land. She is someone that I have dreamed of interviewing when I first had the idea to start a podcast. So it was so lovely to connect with her and to be in community with her. So I'd like to properly introduce you to the wonderful interviewee for today. Leah Larabell is a 2-decade trained and teaching clinical level herbalist, the creator and owner of High Garden Tea, and a nature-loving, tree-hugging conservationist. In fact, Leah's specialty in the herbal world is ecoherbalism, a name she says is just a new term for an old way, which is land-based herbalism with focus on working with the plants as part of the ecosystem in a regenerative and reciprocal relationship. She is a forever student of the land and eternally grateful for the teachings of the many elders that walked the plant path before her and shared it so we all may know the plants as the healers that they are. Let's get into the interview. Welcome, Leah. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Oh my gosh, the honor is mine. Mhm.
I'll talk about this in the solo intro by myself, but I wanted to tell you to your face. I know you've heard it a million times, but I'm gonna cry. Dang
Oh,
it. Um, your your business and your work has truly changed my life and my herbal career. Um, I bought my very first herbalism supplies from your shop. I remember sitting in there, because I love that you wouldn't allow laptops in there. I'd sit in there with like a little notebook and like make little notes, and I would literally sit there and just like listen to you talking to people and like take notes and be like, "Oh, mullein, good for clearing out the lungs," and like listen to you do like your little, just helping people around the shop. But like that's how I learned so much. And I'm drinking one of your teas today. I'm drinking the In the Pines tea. And so yeah, I really want to thank you for bringing your knowledge and your work to the community and for having so much integrity in terms of running a business and building relationships with people and not making it a full profit, having like not having a profit mindset in terms of herbalism, having more of a relationship mindset.
wow. Thank you. I don't even know. That just hit lots of parts. Wow, thank you. My heart, my gut, my head, my eyes. Thank you. Yeah, I had some beautiful teachers. So yeah, that was the only otherwise I would have never known the mullein, all this stuff. And that just really, I didn't ever know you were doing that. And that just lit me up to think that, because that's what it's about, just not about complicated learning experiences all the time or, just buying things. It's about just being in community, being in a space, sitting there, taking the opportunity to carry the plant wisdom forward, right? Oh, wow. And you were doing it.
Yep.
Oh,
Years
wow.
and years and years ago. And here we are
Yes.
today.
Here I
Uh,
am.
So, for anyone listening who does not know how special you are or who you are,
Mm.
can you
So
introduce
everyone
yourself?
else out there.
No. Can you introduce yourself, a bit about your work, and how you came to herbalism?
Whoa. Okay. Get ready for the next 30 minutes. Okay, here I go. Hi, I'm Leah. I can be long-winded. Um, Leah Larabell, I created and I co-own, hate that word, probably co-care for, whatever, with my wonderful husband, High Garden Tea. It is it's a tea. I don't even like the word company or business just because it's I feel like it's more than that. We call it social enterprise for lack of better words. But I'm naturally an herbal teacher. And it's just more of a lifestyle for me. If I never sold another product, if I never, because that's not what it's about, I'll always be an herbalist, or a plant person. Even if I don't want to label it herbalist, I'm a plant lover. I'm a tree hugger. I done this for the past, well, you can follow my journey with me super fast. When I was 18, I came into herbalism through physical need. I had chronic, what they thought was urinary tract infections since I was like 5 years old. I remember being just a little girl and couldn't go to sleepovers because of this pain that might pop up, just these bladder, and then the doctors called it bladder infections, blah, blah, blah. Antibiotics was the answer. By the time I was like 16, 17, they had a new term for it, interstitial cystitis, which is now also kind of co-known as, in a sense, falls under bladder pain syndrome. They had the name, but they didn't have anything to help. And so when you get a name for something, you're like, yay, but then you find out there's really nothing much out there. You're like, I think that's maybe worse. There's a name, but now there's no help. Okay. Um, but just the deepest calling in me knew the wildest part of myself, which had always been the largest part of myself, knew that there was something in the plants that could help me. And not because, like, people listening, that you're like, oh, people probably have to be born into this. I was not. I mean, I was raised on canned ravioli, and, I was definitely not born into this. Like, my grandmother knew things because, like, poke salad is what kept them alive during the Depression, things like that. And they were definitely not rich people. They definitely lived with the land to survive, but herbalism wasn't necessarily ever a thing that was noted or passed down. So I found her name's Lisa Bedner. She was my first teacher. They call her Pipsissewa, just outside of Cookville. And I don't even know how I found her. This wasn't a time where you could just internet anything or couldn't just Google anything. Um, I probably dialed up internet from my school computer or something and found her. And I just knew it was going to be okay. I mean, my nickname was Squirrel because I think I looked like a squirrel and smelled like one too. Like, I've always been a little bit feral and I've never been apologetic about it. That's just who I am. I'm a little bit untamed, and that's okay. So I went to Lisa and she introduced me to some herbs that brought the first relief I'd ever had in my entire life. And so that curse that had been this pain that was just would not, like, just unrelinquishing it, just would not give up. Finally, in the plant world, I had relief. So there was this curse of this pain, but the blessing behind it is I never had to question if herbs worked. And so that was just the immediate step into herbalism without question, without hesitation of like, this works. And so that truly is a gift. That was my physical step into herbalism. I call mine kind of a three-step process. And to understand me at all, you kind of have to step through the processes for just a second. Um, so I used herbs then. I used herbs for my bladder. I used herbs for a sore throat. I would buy things from the store, occasionally gather. I studied under Daryl Patton, and he was like following around a squirrel through the woods. So I learned how to forage and go within the forest. It was a little bit more of a still taking situation rather than understanding reciprocity, and more regenerative herbalism. So I was in an unhealthy relationship at the time, and my heart was hurting. And I definitely hadn't found herbs to help that, the heartache. And it was an unhealthy relationship. And when you're just not happy in your own skin, but you're not quite, don't want to admit to yourself that's the case, and you're just trying to go somewhere and get away, but turns out it's from yourself. I'm driving down the interstate trying to go somewhere, anywhere. There's these three trees I notice on the side of the interstate. They're just calling to me. I pull over at a gas station. I walk over these three trees. I'm pretty sure I'm having some kind of weird nervous breakdown or something at this point. But I felt this just unobstructed, absolute, unconditional love radiating from those trees to myself. And I realized in that moment that's what I needed. Not just obviously I've been fortunate enough to feel loved from my parents, but I hadn't felt unconditional love from another human maybe ever. And in that moment, stepping outside of my own species and realizing true relationships can live outside of that, I realized how much of a cage I'd had myself in. And of course, I felt depressed and isolated and alone because I'd caged myself into a relationship within one species that we can be quite fickle as humans. And so those trees showed me that day spiritual herbalism, emotional herbalism, connection to the larger, and helped me release that cage that I didn't realize was on myself and the blinders. And so my herbalism changed. I very much lived in relationship with the plants. Ethical wildcrafting, asking permission, speaking of plant spirit medicine. And I thought I'd found it. I thought I'd found my path, and I had at the time. But then not too long ago, maybe a couple few years ago, I was out gathering violet for some violet syrup, very early spring, right when those beautiful flowers pop. And I, in my goddess state, and ask permission from the plants, and feeling, like but I'd always had a little bit of a hesitation gathering medicine, herbal medicine, just a little bit of guilt. And there's just something in there. There's that little bit of guilt still in there. Something wasn't sitting right. But, I'd overrode it like I'm asking permission. I'm practicing these things I read of this, and I've been studying ethical wildcrafting. And so I go to gather a couple leaves, I ask, and I get this just zero questions. No, no, you may not gather. And I was like, whoa, okay, is that really what I'm hearing? Am I putting this thought into my head? All the questions you ask, and I ask again. It is a hard no. And I'm like, cool, okay. I at that point I was plant speaking, and I felt very comfortable because, and that isn't woo woo. We've been convinced that that's woo woo. When you calm, when you smell lavender, that is a form of communication. Like we plant speak naturally. There's just diving into deeper levels of it. And so I go in and I sat with that for a second. I was like, okay, why am I getting this hard no? I have a bunch of violets, or what seems like a bunch of violets. I'm not gathering the flowers right now because I'm leaving them for pollinators. I'm leaving enough leaves to be the solar panel for them to gather energy, all these things that my mind knew was the proper thing to do. And I was just sitting with it, and I was like, but I'm doing these things. And I just kept hearing myself saying, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing this. And I was like, oh, I'm not the end of this spiral. I'm not the end of this story. Who else is in my community and my web that may be going to violet right now? And it took just a moment's research, hardly anything, and realized that the violet is the host plant to the fritillary butterfly. And almost at that exact moment is when they would be emerging to eat only these violet leaves for these little caterpillars to survive. And Violet was letting me know, no, it's not for you right now. It's for the caterpillars. It's for these babies. And if there's enough, then it's for you. And all of a sudden, that was my next layer of herbalism, is becoming part of the ecosystem, becoming part of the community, and realizing as herbalists, we're not the end result. We're not the end favor of this plant. We are just a part of this web, and we should consider when gathering, and we should know who else depends on it. Can we impact this plant so that we leave this ecosystem or this situation even better than before we visited and got to know it? And so oftentimes people ask, like, what can you do in a reciprocal relationship? What can you do to offer back to the plant? Know the plant. Know who else depends on it. Get into the conservation and naturalist side of things to know the full story of the plant. Because if we as herbalists aren't taking care of the plants, who the hell is? And so that's my story of how I became an herbalist.
I love that. It's so layered. Was that no from the violets the very first no that you ever received, or just the first one that you felt like really strong about?
It was the first time that I would move from plant to plant to plant and still get a no. Like I might get a
Wow.
no from a cedar, but then I'll move to another cedar and I might get a yes. Or you know what I mean? Like it didn't
Gotcha.
matter where I went or like what part of the yard I went to, I was still getting a no. And I think
Yeah.
that was the first time. But I think I don't know. I feel like maybe it was time I was finally ready to learn that lesson too,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. A
So
collective no instead of an individual no.
yeah.
Oh, interesting, interesting. I'm so glad that you brought up plant communication because I've been dying to ask you this. I've heard from a few of your students that you have a really interesting way of helping people to like first delve into plant communication and listening to a plant. Um, and it's something that I do, but I don't have a process, and it kind of just happens. It just happens. I don't know how it happened. So it's not something that I feel confident in teaching because I'm like, I don't know, they just talk to me. But I've heard that this is something that you help break down for people. So can you help us break down the process of how someone can start communicating with a plant?
Yeah, and I mean, what you just said can ring completely true. Like, you have a process. It's because it's kind of like you can communicate with your dog and y'all don't speak the same language. And for some reason, that's become an accepted form of communication because people are familiar with dogs in our lives or cats. It's the same thing with plants. You're not going to communicate with your dog or your cat the same way that I do. So everyone does have a different way. And that's where part of we just have to get out of this old mindset. And it's 100-year plan, and we don't have time to get into this, but like basically 100-year plan from like Rockefeller and Carnegie, that we have been separated from the natural world in this way in our natural healing processes. Um, and so we're just living out that plan, even within herbalism, because the spirituality was stripped from it, pulling away what indigenous people knew were equally as important, the land-based herbalism, indigenous-based herbalism. It was never a plant for a problem, because there's like a pill for an ill was the whole thing that came up during that time where the medical boards and things were being established and natural healing was being crushed. Pill for an ill was the big movement. And then for herbalists to step forward with any type of respect, the botanic movement, then it kind of came forward as like, well, here's a plant for a problem, kind of meeting each other toe to toe. And if you brought in spiritual aspects to it, like plant speaking, that uh, people indigenous to these practices, land-based practice, Celtic, indigenous, all these peoples that came before us that actually had much deeper relationships with the plants, they knew it's really hard to heal with plants and leave out these connection pieces. But that, if during the botanic movement, when they brought the spirituality and connection pieces forward, they looked too woo-woo. They were considered it was quackery. So they had to leave all that and strip that all away and just look very stern and botanic and scientific about it. And so much was lost. And that still echoes to us that, oh, but that's not real. It's just as real. Because within herbalism, the reason I think a lot of people come back to herbalism is because we're missing that connection piece. We're missing that like that thing that feels like you've like lost your arm but or you're part of your body but you don't know why. And we in deep our deepest instincts, we know it's not okay to be so disconnected from the land and from our own knowing and from knowing where food is and knowing where medicine is and knowing that you can sit at the base of an oak for advice. Like our deepest knowing knows that we're not okay not having those skills anymore. So you come back like, oh, this herbalism thing seems great, but then if you're just like reading certain texts or you're just shipping in pills, capsules, everything, these pretty little packages, that connection piece is lost and left out. And so the healing is much more shallow. It is. And so when you start to speak to the plants, hugging a tree, putting your feet on the soil, shaking your fur a little bit, and getting out of that cage, that's when the deepest healing on lots of levels begins to happen. And so that's where plant speaking comes in. It isn't kind of like, I'm going to do this plant speaking. It seems interesting. It's got to come from so deep within and just knowing that you can do it without doubt. You're going to feel funny, just like go to hug a tree. You're going to you can't help but look around and see who's looking, but the more you do it, the more natural it becomes. And so, yeah, I have a process. I've never shared it over like not in person, so I don't know if it will. It's one of more those when I'm with you in the moment we speak. It's what a lot of it has to do with is you have to drop. We have three brains. We have the head brain, and that's just confirmed even through studies are beginning to confirm it and so forth. We have the head brain, we have the heart brain, and we have the gut brain. Head brain, analytical, problem solving. I mean, evolves. It's definitely that separates a lot of our human abilities and this and that. But it is a bit of a control freak. And it has taken over and set our other two brains into a bit of atrophy. We have the heart brain that reads like more of electromagnetic energy, and so everything has a certain frequency. And that through the heart brain area is where you can pick up on other frequencies. Again, you can read this. It is not woo woo. This is actual studied. And I think it's about 10 feet without a 10-foot radius with outside different beings. And so your heart brain picks up on electromagnetic energy. That's where, like you fall in love in your heart space. You feel things with your heart. And so you feel different things on different levels with the heart. Your gut brain is instinctual. That's where these old sayings of like, I have a gut feeling, or just, oh, I don't know, what's another old saying? It's just a gut feeling is a really, I just feel it in my gut. And so that was something that as we were maybe out in forest and so forth, you needed to know that there was a mountain lion creeping up behind you, or there was food around a turn, or water was just along the way. It's just that is your gut brain. It is an instinctual, when you're even now, I'd say walking in a dark alleyway and it kind of hits you in your gut to maybe get out of there, we still have these things. Or when you step into a room and you just feel your heart just explode, like, I belong here, we still have these brains. They just aren't exercised as much as our head brain. Going back to it being a control freak, all this will tie together, I promise. um, and so when we stand before or beside a plant, our head brain automatically gets in the way, and that is not who plant speaks. Our head brain has absolutely nothing to do with plant speaking. It's actually the one that interferes. It's our heart and our gut spaces. And so I do a little practice where you are standing before a plant and you try to, you've heard the old saying, they have eyes in the back of their head. And so you soften your gaze and you're no longer looking out the front. You're literally trying to see out of the back of your head. And I'll start asking questions of, is something moving? Is the sun shining? What's back there? And you'll automatically, you can't help it, you'll feel energy drop in your body because it's those other brains that knows what's behind you, not your head. And the moment that drops, we breathe it in, and then it starts becoming breath work. That's reason, like, when you need to breathe, you're bringing energy down. And so you hold that energy there, and then you bring your gaze or your attention back forward to who you're speaking to. Be dandelion, be oak, be maple. And through that space, somewhere between your heart and your gut, you open that up. It may be images, it may be feelings, it may be random, just who know, it may be a song that comes. It may be, I've had people, there's been so many fun different interpretations. And at first, it's really questionable if what you got was your head or your heart or whatever. Just don't question, just let it flow. But where I think a lot of the magic comes from and why it's so impactful for my students is we, in a circle, we start sharing what we got. And nothing made up, just doesn't matter if yours is different than everyone else's. But as we go through the circle, we start seeing these very obvious connections. And it's like, oh my God, you'll see people's faces drop and they'll be like, I got the same thing. What? And you start seeing just how real this is. And so yeah, it's a simple process of getting out of your head. All that long-winded way to say get out of your head and into your heart and gut.
For you personally, okay. So when I am communicating with plants, I don't get images. Sometimes I get words, but it's mostly just a feeling. Do you get like voices, images, like different things like that? Or like how do the plants in general, I know it's probably different plant to plant, but in general, how do you like personally receive the information from the plants?
As a whole, I would say images.
Oh, cool.
Um, I would say um, I didn't know much about tulip poplars. I knew a couple bits of medicine, but I didn't know much at all. And then I was standing with tulip poplar and I would feel just like it felt like also feeling like it just felt like I could just move, like I was just bendy and flex, but I thought of it as a hardwood, you know. And I just keep reflecting back to that one for some reason at times, and just it went against everything I thought I knew about that tree. Granted, I didn't know crap about that tree when I was doing it, but my husband Joel knows a lot about woods and so forth, and I was like, yeah, I was out hanging out with tulip poplar, and I kept getting like this flexible bendy thing. I wonder if it's good for like ligaments or joints or whatever. And he was like, oh, that's a really soft wood. I was like, it's a hardwood. And he was like, well, no, of all the wood, like it's very like cushiony, and that's why it can be so straight and it doesn't crack or break. And like certain floors are made out of, they want to have like a little bit of spring to them, like it's one of the softest woods you can make a floor out of. And I was just like, oh. And so it's just kind of one of those, like I could feel my body being, but I also saw like a sway or a flex, you know. So it's just an all over, it's an all over. Yeah.
That's so cool. I love
Mm.
that.
Can we
I love
talk about plant speaking a little bit more?
what?
Can we talk about plant speaking? One more thing about it.
Absolutely. We could spend the whole rest of the podcast talking about it.
Okay, well, I'm glad you brought it up just because this is something that I haven't shared, but because you do seem interested in plant speaking and everything, I feel drawn to share it. I can't share all of it, but I want to share part of it. I do, I can't help but think, and I've got a pretty strong intuition that plant speaking and plant communication has to be the future of herbalism. Hear me out. I had a plant call out to me very strongly a year and a half ago, and it was demanding attention. And this plant, I knew a little bit about it. It's a native plant, but it definitely doesn't get much, it doesn't get attention, you know. And I was just thinking of everything I knew about it and just this very much glyphosate is one of the things that was very much coming up. And through what I knew about the plant, because I knew more than just some basic stuff. I knew the story of the plant. I knew the plant. I knew why glyphosate may come up or may have come up. And I'm still doing studies. I need to get about two more confirmed, basically confirmed significant results. And I am having zero trouble getting the significant results. Just the studies are very expensive. The testing is very expensive, and I'm paying it out of my pocket. This plant is showing to reduce glyphosate levels in our bodies. That is huge, especially for children. Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, there's so much that is, they can pay lawyers all day long. They can do this and that and tell us that it doesn't bring about cancer. It does. I'm sorry, it just does. And so it's building in our bodies. It build, especially in some bodies that have difficulty maybe processing and eliminating as well. And so this plant's ability to help us process or break down different proteins and eliminate glyphosate from our bodies is extraordinary. But what I realized to be even more extraordinary is these plants are changing as well because they have to. We're reading texts that are 100, 200, 300 years old, like studies that are old based on our bodies and our environment long before a lot of these things that we're dealing with were here. So these plants respond faster than human bodies. They respond much quicker, and they are finding ways through microplastics, through glyphosate, through different things that our bodies have not yet learned how to deal with. But we don't know who. How do you know who has learned to help break down microplastics? How do you know who processes glyphosate the quickest? And the only way, and that's not in texts, they weren't dealing with that 200 years ago. The plants have to teach us. That's how. because you can do studies all day long. Do you know how many plants there are? If you're just studying every plant to see who can better break down microplastics or this new forever chemical that's about to go into potatoes and broccoli, like you'd be study like you can't just study every plant. The plants have to tell us. And one told me straight up, hey, check me for glyphosate. Like, look what I can do with glyphosate because I plant speak. And this old thing that's been considered this woo-woo practice or this outdated practice that was absolutely part of how people's learned how to work with different plants and who to call upon and when. Um, it needs to be revived if we're going to learn how to work with plants in our new modern environment and who can do different things and have adjusted to different situations. Because old texts, yes, they're still relevant, but we've got a lot of new issues we need to learn how to work with.
I have never thought about that before. How yeah, how our texts are based off of a lifestyle that no one, at least in the Western world, lives anymore.
Mhm.
That's really interesting. Yeah. Wow.
Plant speaking, baby.
Yeah, so powerful. Um, okay, this question kind of goes along. So, I want to talk about ecoherbalism. Of course, you're the
Yeah.
queen of ecoherbalism. So can you define what that means to you and then how that looks for your herbalism practice?
It's so funny. I call it eco-herbalism. I call it regenerative herbalism. I've called it land-based herbalism. I don't even have a proper name for it because it's what Violet showed me that day.
Hmm.
That's where it came from. And I haven't necessarily had it's a blend of animism, bioregional herbalism, it's just I'm trying to come up with a new name for an old way. It's what indigenous and land-based practices did. That they knew they had to know the plants, they knew how to speak to the plants, they knew what the plants needed so that the plants could regenerate themselves. So it's really just relearning so much that's been lost is all that it is. And kind of what we talked about earlier, seeing ourselves as a part of the ecosystem, a part of the spiral, and not the end of the line. Or just like, okay, it comes to me. Wow. I hear all the time, and I'm not trying to put this down. It's like God put everything here for us. Boo. That's a very end of the line. We are all sharing this beautiful blessing of a home. And we don't allow other creatures to live here. We all share this same landscape. And so, as herbalists, it's really important that we recognize just our place in the web and get to learn about even more than just the plants, but again, what the plants need and what their ecosystem needs, and even who our other neighbors in nature, who the birds need, how what they need, what the butterflies need, because the plants need the birds and the butterflies what everybody's dependent on one another, and we've lost connection with what everyone kind of needs and how we play together well. And that's what this nameless or eco-herbalism, regenerative herbalism, yeah, again, it's so funny. I have a hard time labeling it. But I know what it is, and it's that. It's finding and I've actually come up with 4 steps and I'm writing a book on it. Needless to say, I'm having a hard time naming the book. So I haven't even. But it's really like I'm working with, I don't know if you know David George Haskell. He's one of my favorite authors, and he's wrote like The Forest Unseen, and he's putting some stuff together with for my book of like I'm speaking about here's what herbalism knows about, let's say, anise hyssop or violet. And he, in part, because I would love to see in every herbal monograph, you see like location, energy, medicinal uses, gathering, preparation, and then I think right below that, as essential as every part of that herbal monograph should be like ecosystem role. Um, and that's missing from all these. And so I'm going to, in the book, I'm creating a new, I'm hoping like that can start being part of an herbal monograph is like the ecosystem role of this plant. So you can also know that aspect of it. And so that's a form of ecoherbalism. Yeah, it's just really working. an herbalist, conservationist, naturalist. You're more. It's a lifestyle, you know?
Yeah, this past couple years I've been I think I've been at war with the deer. Um but I officially gave up this year. They win. Because I have a fenced in some of my property, not all of it. But outside of it, I planted some elders and there's some poke growing. And I have lived here for 4 years and I have never been able to harvest any of it because the deer just come through and demolish them. I'm always so angry and I've tried a few ways. And this year I kind of just surrendered where I was like, you know what? They obviously need it more than I do. It's fine. I've never been able to pick fresh elderberry because in our up here in Clarksville, they like only grow on the sides of the roads. And so I'm not going to pick the polluted ones. So I was so excited to grow my own. But you know what? Other things need it more than I do. And I kind of just took that as like a big lesson of like l leaning into your work of just like, okay, yeah, I planted these for me, but I'm also, I guess, planting them for the whole wider community. And so every year I get to watch them grow a tiny bit. They're 4 years old and they're only about 6 inches tall, my elders, because they just get stripped down every year. But they are now for the deer and the birds and whoever wants them. They're not for humans.
Oh, that's beautiful. And it just honestly, that's an unfortunate part of being in like an area of high population, high human population, because for every one of our conveniences is a disconvenience for the wild ones. They're losing habitat, they're losing so much. And through our conveniences, it is important that we offer something back to them if possible. And that's beautiful that that's an offering. And honestly, it also just speaks to when you're seeing a high population of something, a lot of times it's just showing an ecosystem out of balance. Like people condemn coyotes. Coyotes keep deer population in check. It keeps down the disease of deer and so forth. But people are as terrified. You know, it's just it's all about ecosystem. And so, heck yeah, good for you. Like,
Yeah,
all
I've
right, it's the deers now.
Yeah, I've definitely thought about that where I think if I lived in more of like a forested area, then that, wasn't in the middle of a city, then I would try harder to protect like my specific plants. But yeah, because
Hmm.
I'm in the middle of Clarksville and I know majority of the people are just having plain lawns, nothing for any of the wildlife to eat. And so I'm trying to do what I can on my little acre of yes, I have my own garden, but any of the wild spots, I'm just like, I can't harvest from there for majority of the time because what are the deer gonna eat, you know? Like they need something too. And we have
Yeah.
so many in our area, which is really surprising for being in the middle of a city. But I have like full 25 plus herds coming through my property and eating from my trees and my elders and my poke and everything. So doing what I can on my little bit of land.
Yeah. Heck yeah. Homegrown National Park movement. Go ahead and sign up for that. Be like, I am. I'm doing. Are you familiar with the Homegrown National Park?
No.
Oh, Douglas Talent. Yeah, it's a really great organization. And I helped write their how to work with HOAs and native scaping, wrote a paper for them. But it's basically if so we can't control much what the government's doing with land, what large corporations are doing with land. We can obviously have input, but it can be very challenging when we try to control those that control what they do with things. But there is an incredible amount of acreage that we own privately as what we call our yards and our lawns. And if we turn those back into habitats and like native plantings and offering parts for the wild, we can create the largest national park in this entire country, like surpassing by far the amount of acreage. And so, yeah, you can just like register your space as a homegrown national park and they put it on it and they're patching all the yards together to see how many acres can be included. And also you can see where gaps are and like that helps to create wildlife corridors because, a lot of issue, obviously roads are going to be a major issue, but if you have a fence, like something that a little hole that a little groundhog could get through, or so, just ways to help our neighbors in nature. And so, yeah, check them out. They're a really great resource.
We have groundhogs too. I'm
Yes, I
done
love
patching holes. I'm leaving the holes.
They're aerating for you. They're aerating your lawn
They're
for
trying to break
free.
my ankles, what they're trying to do, but
It is just because it's so funny because people get so frustrated in the city and they're like, go to the country. Why don't these animals go to the country? And I've lived in the country. We lived out deep into Jolton. There is no country. Like I live up in the mountains and I have people hunting the coyotes, killing the deer, killing the groundhogs. This magic country that these animals should go to, it's gone. And so they literally have nowhere to go. And so it's just how we learn to live in relationship with it because and it isn't like, oh, we'll take care of like if the animals collapse, if the animal kingdom starts to collapse, the wild animal kingdom and the butterflies and the insects, I mean, what are we down a third of the insect population? There's no us. Like we're just a part of this web that's way more fragile than we realize. And it can get hopeless at times if you're like a extreme conservationist like I am and so forth, but realizing that like sometimes it can get hopeless or you can be like, well, they're doing this. So, like, okay, some people are like using chat GPT like crazy. And for as a therapist, as an artist, this and that. And I'll be like, oh, that wastes a lot of water and there's a lot of pollution and air pollution and really difficult on the communities around. And they're like, well, it's nothing compared to what corporations are doing. That's just that's just being a part of the problem. Like, okay, yeah, they're doing that, but you're still, but even if it's a small part of the problem, you're still being a part of the problem, or you can be a part of the solution. And you may feel like you'll never tip the scale, but enough of us being a part of the solution will at least hold that scale long enough that things in policy may change. And so, yeah, it's just finding ways to be a part of the solution and never giving up hope because enough of us finding a way to be a tiny part of the solution, we can hold that scale, I think, for a long time. I don't
yeah,
know
like
how I
I
just got into
saw, no, I saw that the monarch population went up this
Yes,
year. And
yes.
so that was a huge, oh, it just felt so good to be like, okay, like, oh, sorry, dogs are freaking out. Can you hear them?
It was cute. No, it was with your hooray, and they like cheered with you. It
Yeah.
was perfect.
No, but yeah, like it felt so good to be like, okay, like all these times that I am, trying to plant the milkweeds and all the different native plants, and it's actually like really paying off.
That shows because awareness went there. People started being aware of the need of milkweed. People and like butterfly weed, milkweed, and the population went up like within a year. Like it shows the power of that. It's just where that awareness and attention goes makes a difference.
Yeah, so let's keep talking in that same vein of like different things that people can do to help make it feel better, like they are part of the solution, like you were just saying. Obviously planting native plants, but I also wanted to talk about you talk a lot about invasive plants and how the world at large kind of demonizes invasive plants, but they also can offer us a lot. So that's another way that we can work with what's around us. So how did you get into working with invasive plants and how do you like to incorporate them into your herbal life?
Yeah. Well, then I kind of mentioned because I'd mentioned there's a four-step thing that I'd found with ecoherbalism that I put in the book when I teach classes. Like the first one is look into the past or the future, and we've kind of touched on that. And the second one is be a good neighbor. Um, and that's kind of where the working with the invasives comes in. So being a good neighbor, like we just talked about, wild yards and leaving leaf litter, realizing, oh, that's a vitamin for the tree. And that's also where little precious fireflies are incubating, understanding the importance of native plants. I think a lot of people don't understand that to understand difference in invasive and native. So there's native plants, and that is plants that are from this land. And they have grown here, evolved here. So the insects, the birds, their bodies have evolved alongside these plants, and that is what they need for food. That is what they need for sustenance. And so I kind of like, yes, a bird can eat a berry from a Japanese honeysuckle, but it's like a Skittle to us. I can eat it, but I'm not getting deep nutrition, like say as Virginia creeper, the berries, if it will last the bird all day, and so that's deep sustenance because that's what they've evolved alongside. And a lot of the plants, the reason people like invasive plants is because, oh, English ivy, nothing's eating it. It just stays pretty. But if I have another plant that's a native, oh, it just gets all eaten up and gets all ugly. That tells you a lot. If you have a plant in your yard that's not being eaten, it's food for nothing. So they could maybe, yes, consume the leaf, and it's either going to be toxic to them or basically like eating cardboard and give them no sustenance. And so the reason native plants are so important is because if you want to keep this ecosystem thriving, they need food. Insects are the base to our ecosystem, and so they need these host plants that are native. And then during the native plant movement, I did unfortunately see some herbicide companies jump on and saw it as a great opportunity to start villainizing other plants that are naturalized. And there's a big difference in naturalized and invasive. And so dandelion, and they're like, ooh, this is our chance to like demonize dandelion again. Dandelion is naturalized. Plantain is naturalized. Chickweed is naturalized. There's a lot of plants that weren't native to here, but when they came here, they somehow magically and majestically learned how to work within our ecosystem, and they have over time become food. You'll see bunnies nibbling away and so grateful for the dandelion and the chickweed. You don't see forests taken out by chickweed. You don't like you might see, oh, there's a bunch of chickweed in my
Wish.
flower bed. Yeah, there's chickweed all in my flower bed. Yeah, there is, but it'll also die back as soon as it gets warm and it's going to nourish that soil. So that's naturalized, a plant that has learned to live in community. Then you do have the next level of invasive plants, plants that do not live in harmony, and they will take over an ecosystem or they will take over a certain environment. English ivy, it will, the moment it starts growing up the tree and it's burying, it will smother trees. It will smother out other plants and nothing's eating it. And so there's no consumer, there's no predator of the plant. These plants aren't evil, they just don't have a predator. And so kudzu, I mean, you can see forests taken out by it. And so that's where invasive, I see humans having the opportunity to be what is lacking. So kudzu is one of the strongest medicines that I know. If you put a price tag on its head, we become the consumer. We become the predator. We start gathering kudzu, and good luck keeping up kudzu when a billion Americans think you're the hot new thing to buy. You're the trending item. But it's really popular. Like it's one of the most popular and sought after herbs in like TCM. It's kudzu is antispasmodic. Kudzu root is it's been noted for migraines, TCM, like it just trigeminal neuralgia. It's been noted for spastic bowel disease. It's been noted just for so much. You can look up um, an herbal monograph on kudzu, especially through TCM perspective, to really get a lot of the picture there. And kudzu root is a power. I mean, how many bowel disorders are going on? And this is one of the number one powdered kudzu root mixed in with miso is a powerful medicinal soup. And the roots are huge, but people can go after it. And I mean, the leaves are edible. I'm not going to say it's the most delicious thing in the world, but they're highly nutritive and edible. They're not poisonous or anything. So maybe they could start going into some deep greens powder or something. And so English ivy is one of, I think it's in like 80% of European cough medicines. Um, it's really incredible to moisten and bring up that thick, stuck gunk and to just really create a more productive, it is a powerful respiratory tonic. It's one of the most popular that you're going to see in other countries, in European pharmacies. You go into a pharmacy and you're going to see English ivy in most of the respiratory tonics. And so it's just learning their medicine and being the consumer. That's how I see invasive. Don't plant them. That's not, there is plenty, but we can't, I saw a trend, I think, in the herbal world of just like shying away. And that's disappearing, definitely. I'm seeing a lot of people talking about working with invasives more, but for a while it became taboo to talk about like invasives as medicine. And so then really none of that medicine was being shared, and they're really taking over where we really need to be saying, hey, here's how you um, consume this, but also acknowledge, don't go planting it everywhere. We're consuming this to bring a balance to it.
Yeah, I love that we become the predators of the invasive plants.
Yeah, we can actually be balanced for once, right?
I've been going and pulling up all of the privet shoots that have been starting to pop up.
Yeah.
Now that you can kind of see where they are since all the natives have kind of died back. Um, I knew that kudzu had some things, but I couldn't remember what it was. But we have a greenway here that is a big one of my favorite parts of the entire greenway is it opens up and it's just covered in kudzu. It's so
Oh,
pretty, unfortunately. But yeah, I'm gonna go get some kudzu root this year. That sounds fun. I'm gonna go
you'll
root
find
dig.
plenty. You'll find plenty.
Oh, is there a an invasive that you feel like you work with the most or have like a closer relationship to?
An invasive?
Hmm.
A honeysuckle for sure.
Mm.
Honeysuckle, oh my God. And it's the Japanese honeysuckle that we're have the most, that's where most of the research and the traditional, even beyond research, traditional, because there's research in herbs, and that's where we like to talk about because it makes people feel very comfortable. This has been researched, but I'll give 1,000 years of traditional use a lot of weight. Because even in research, what we have to recognize is that'll oftentimes isolate one constituent, isolate one compound, see how that a reaction comes from that. One isolate or one constituent is not a plant. That'd be like, I say this in class, that's like an alien coming down, testing us, and we're loaded with adrenaline, and they're like, adrenaline, constituent of human, like this is the active constituent of human. When you hear active constituent, it is the exact same thing. It's this thing that's been noted as, oh, no, this is probably what makes the plant work. That's so bogus. There are so many things that make the plant work. But anyway, so research, it can be good, but it also has its shortcomings. So I've been looking at research, but then also acknowledging traditional medicinal use, traditional use. That's what has been worked with and perfected for hundreds of years. And so Japanese honeysuckle, that one is definitely probably my favorite antiviral slash antibacterial. It's the whole plant. I've gathered the stems because they're noted as an anti-inflammatory, and the flowers, a stronger antiviral. And when I was dealing with long COVID, when my parents were, because there's a lot of inflammation with that, there's still some viral potential, like virus embedded. There's something going on with the virus, the way that it's lingering for some reason, a lot of theory around that. But when you mix inflammatory and this antiviral, and I saw incredible results with that tincture. Also, people that say maybe have herpes, the herpes virus, with whether it presents as shingles, genital herpes, oral herpes, you can take honeysuckle tincture daily, half dropper full, and you're just potentially, I can't say will, but I've seen over time, and what can happen is seeing much less frequent outbreaks. Or if there is an outbreak, it's going to be a much shorter duration. And so it's a really powerful antiviral, and it's also a powerful antibacterial. Um, Bladder infections, any type of infection that's going to go in my formula because it's helping to slow the viral replication while slowing a bacterial production. So yeah, honeysuckle.
Okay, as we go to kind of wrap this up, if there was one message that the plants are whispering to humanity right now, what do you think it is?
Woo! You're setting me up. Is it what I want to say or what I think the plants want to say?
Let's do
Let's
both.
see.
What is Leah's
Um,
advice right now? And then what do you kind of what's the collective message that you're feeling from the plants right now?
I wish I had what I'm feeling from the plants right now. It's a little bit, honestly, it's a little hard to filter that past my own lens. Um, because I am feeling, there's a lot of environmental protections being stripped, the Clean Water Act, the air, air quality protections, the boundary waters. There's just a lot of, public lands being trying to constantly be sold off and just things that we've been dealing with for a long time. And I just want to go into the forest and like chain myself to as many trees as spread myself and chain myself to all the trees and just be like, stop. And I can feel hopeless, but then I still do. That's why I share like, okay, herbalists, we can do this, and plant people and gardeners and everybody. But I will say every time that I go into nature and I take a walk in the forest and I actually let the fear and the those feelings subside because the forest will wash it right off of you. There's hope is nature is so regenerative and nature is so resilient. If we just, I truly do believe that if we all just do our part and just reconnect, which we need to do anyway, it can be okay. Like it really can. And just don't give up on it because that's when it's not okay. It's a nasty trick that can happen to us when we feel overwhelmed and we become numb. But just whatever the tiny part is, it whether it's using less plastic or not talking to Chat GPT about what your day was like or drawing a dog with three heads or whether it's um, whether it's letting your yard go wild or letting native plants stand or like you said giving in and letting the deer have the elderberry or planting two blueberry bushes, one for you and one for the foxes and raccoons and everything, cover one but leave one uncovered. Whatever the tiny steps that we do, it's going to make us healthier and it's going to make the ecosystem healthier and it helps us become who we are, which is a part of the natural world and the ecosystem. So I don't know what my answer is other than just do your part. And even if it feels like it's enough or it isn't, it's what you're doing and it's beautiful.
It's better than nothing.
It is. And like one little step always leads to another. It does. And it takes you out of that frozen mode.
Yeah, having action always helps in those times that I feel really helpless
Hmm.
and like stressed about what's going on. Just doing, yeah, one little thing often, yeah, brings a lot of vitality and hope back in.
Yeah, and getting and going to maybe if you're interested in herbalism, maybe going to a conference. They're really lovely. Like there's the Wild Medicine Conference coming up. There's the Florida Herbal Conference is coming up. I don't know. There's always some beautiful conferences, and there's something about going around and being around just a group of people that care about the same things. You're like, oh my gosh, okay, I'm not alone. Like it feels really. There's Appalachian Forest Farming Coalition usually has a beautiful forest farming conference. Just kind of like look up something that you're interested in and type conference behind it in the year. And there's probably going to be something and something about going around other people that care about these things and y'all share ideas and it fills you with so much fire and hope.
That is so true. I always leave so energized, like exhausted from not sleeping, but energized
Uh-huh.
mentally, emotionally, heart space
Yeah,
energized.
yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Leah. I'm so excited that we got to dig into plant communication and eco-herbalism. If people want to find out more about you, where can they follow you?
Our website is highgardentea.com and it's tea. It's really, I mean, it's dope tea. It's really good tea. Like it's all this that I'm talking about, I put into practice into our tea. And I also under each tea have a section called Teaching Herbalism Through Tea Craft. And so it tells why each ingredient is in the tea and it kind of teaches about synergy. And so even the website is a place to teach. And then I also teach for free. Like I try to do a lot of mini lessons on Instagram. We're at High Garden Tea on there, but if social media is icky to you, I am writing the book, but that's going to be out for a second. I do teach classes. Those are on, not many, but those are on our website. And I'm about to put up, I'm in the process of shooting a free Foundations of Herbalism program for YouTube. So everyone can at least get a baseline education for free.
That's so cool.
Yeah, we'll see. And all of these will be out in 2035.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Just the life of an entrepreneur.
Uh-huh.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Didn't I say Leah is such a wealth of knowledge? Oh, I am so, so grateful for everything that she offers to this world and for how she teaches and how she lives her life and for how much she cares about other than humans, like the plants and the animals and the insects and everything. It's just so deeply entwined into her life, and I love seeing that expressed. If you would like to follow her or buy any of her products, you can find her at highgardentea.com and then on social medias at highgardentea. I think my next episode is going to be more about plant communication because that is something that I am also very passionate about. So stay tuned for that. And I hope you learned a lot from Leah today. If you would like to find out more about my upcoming classes and offerings, you can find me at rootandwandercollective.com. I'll see you along the plant path.